Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inkwell Remix. My name is John, and today's video on Beauty and the Beast is by request from a friend at my local gaming store. If you'd like to see a video on a particular movie deck or Lorcana build, then please do let me know down in the comments and I'll be delighted to oblige. But for now, sit back, relax, as Inkwell Remix proudly presents your movie deck. So everyone, one of the things that makes Beauty and the Beast such an interesting movie deck is that it has good cards in every single colour, which means there's a lot of deck building challenges when it comes to this movie. So what I've started with is just going through every single colour and picking out the best cards that that particular ink has to offer us. So in Amber, we have 5 good cards to play with. We've got Gaston, Frightful Bully, a 3/3 for 2, with a rather interesting boost ability. When he's boosted and he quests, he can force an opposing character to quest on their next turn. So it's the opposite of Reckless, effectively. A very good way of locking down really powerful challenges like Demona from being able to challenge your characters. We have a 3-drop Gaston, Baritone Bully, a 3/3 Singer 5 for 3, which is very good. And we have Gaston, Despicable Dealer, who's probably the most powerful Amber card in the movie. A 2/4 for 3 uninkable, but he can exert and you pay 2 less ink for the next character you play this turn. So drop him on 3, and on turn 4, you can play a 6-drop. It's pretty insane, and that's definitely the best card we have available. Finally, we have the Beast, Gracious Prince. He's probably better in a constructed deck than in this movie deck, but a 5/4 for 5 is reasonable, and most importantly, all your princess characters get +1 strength and +1 willpower. So he's a nice big boost for Belle. Our final Amber card is Be Our Guest, which has been an amazing song since set 1. For a two-cost song, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal a character card, and put it into your hand. Deck filtering is always good. Now, Amber is one of the 2 weakest colours for Beauty and the Beast, and we've got at least 5 playable cards, so you can see why this is going to be a challenge. Moving on then, we have Amethyst. Now, Amethyst, by contrast to Amber, is one of the strongest colours that we have. At least 9 really good playable cards. So we have Chip the Teacup, a completely standard 2/2 for 1, but there are very few 1-drops in Beauty and the Beast, which makes him better than you'd think. Alongside that, we have Cogsworth, Illuminary Watchman, your other 1/1, and your other 1-cost character. And this guy's a 1/1, but when you play him, he gives chosen character rush this turn. So he can always target himself at worst, but he's quite a good trick for a turn other than turn 1, so you can give something bigger than him a quick challenge. We have Belle, Untrained Mystic, who is a reasonably good card, a 3/3 for 3, and you can move a damage from chosen character to chosen opposing character. She's not the best, but we want her for her big version a little later on. We have the Wardrobe, a 3/4, just a solid stat line for 3 inkable, very worth playing. Mrs. Potts, a 3/4 for 4 inkable with 2 lore, and the useful ability, it'll turn out all right. When you play this character, if you have Lumiere or Cogsworth in play, you may draw a card. She's playable by herself. The stat line is pretty good. And if you can get a card when you play her as well, because you have a Lumiere or a Cogsworth, I think she goes up to being really quite good. Well worth considering. Our standout card, of course, is Belle, Accomplished Mystic. She's amazing. She gets played in Constructed all the time. We absolutely want to play 4 of her in every version of the deck that runs Amethyst. She is that good. Now, this also has a few other things. We've got the Mystic Rose, which is, I think, an extremely good item for a movie deck. Banish it, choose a character named Beast, and give them +2 lore this turn. And if you have a character named Belle in play, you may move up to 3 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opposing character. So you get the Accomplished Mystic's effect and a boost of 2 lore on one of your beasts. And there's one beast in particular that can take crazy advantage of that if you have the chance. We also have the Rose Lantern. Moves damage every turn at the cost of 2 ink. It's slow, it's not amazing, but movie decks can often be a very grindy kind of game, and this is a good way of grinding. It also has some relevance later on with the multicolour deck that I'll have a look at. And then finally, we have the Library, A Gift for Belle, another constructed staple, probably the 2nd or 3rd most powerful card in Amethyst. So as I said, Amethyst, lots of playable cards, a really powerful ink in this particular movie. Then we have Emerald, which is the other weak ink. But Emerald's got some good stuff. We have the Enchantress, Unexpected Judge. 1/1 quest for 2, but when she's challenged, she gets +2 power. So when someone challenges her, she hits for 3, which is usually enough to take someone out in response, and you're never going to challenge with her. You're just questing for 2 every turn. Nice and straightforward. We have not 1, but 3 legendaries in Emerald. We have the Beast Wolfsbane from back in set 1. He's okay. A 4/4 with Rush and 2 Law isn't bad. And when you play this character, exert all opposing damaged characters. That's probably not going to do an awful lot, but it's an option. If he was 5 inkable, I'd say he was really good. 5 uninkable, he's fine. We have Belle, Hidden Archer, who is also fine. I love her, but realistically, she is just fine. 3/3 with 3 Law is a nice stat line. Shift 3 would be great if we had any 2-cost bells, which we don't, so that makes her a little bit less useful. And then her rather mad Thorny Arrows ability, whenever she's challenged, the challenging character's player discards all cards in their hand. It sounds great, but the problem is, because we can't shift her on 3, usually by the time our opponent's challenging her, which is about turn 6 or so, they can probably jettison their hand, or maybe just give up 1 card. And losing 1 card to get rid of a 3/3 with 3 Law is a pretty good deal. So, although I really want to love Belle, she's just not quite good enough because we don't have that shift line for her. If we did, she'd be really quite good. Now, finally, we have the Beast Relentless. This is the guy who really benefits from the Mystical Rose. A 4/5 with 2 Law for 6 inkable is fine, but second wind. Whenever an opposing character is damaged, you may ready this character. There are no conditions there. If you sacrifice the Mystical Rose, the beast can quest for 4. Then you damage someone else, you ready him, he can quest for 4 more. So every single time you ready him, it's 4 Law when you trigger the Mystic Rose. It shouldn't be hard to get at least 8, maybe 12 Law off a single turn with this guy and the Mystical Rose in play. I've never done it myself, but it's one of those combinations that just has so much potential, it's probably worth investigating. But that being said, as I mentioned earlier, Emerald is definitely one of the weaker colors in Beauty and the Beast, so I wouldn't play this unless you can use at least 4 colors in your movie deck. Now let's get to the good stuff. Ruby, one of probably the second strongest color in the movie deck. Lots of useful cards here. So we have not 1 but 2 2-cost beasts. I'll get into why that's good later, but for now, just be aware that it's really good we have beasts that cost 2. And we have Beast Aggressive Lord, a 3/2 with 1 Law. He can be boosted, and when he's boosted, if he challenges a character, your opponent loses a Law and you gain a Law. So the boost is nice. It means that he can start challenging and still gain you Law, as well as draining your opponent. Boost for 2 is a bit expensive, so unless you've got a sort of easy 1-power target to take down, I'm not sure I'd always go for it. But he's pretty solid, and if you need to drain your opponent's Law, you need to drain your opponent's Law. I certainly like him, and again, 2-cost beast. This is important. I really do like Snowfield Troublemaker. A 3/1 with Rush is useful by itself, and even better, whenever this character challenges, if he's at a location, he takes no damage from the challenge. We do have a location that goes well with him, so it's quite feasible for 3 ink to play this guy, put him in a location, and then clobber something much bigger than him without being banished. A very solid card. We've got Gaston, Arrogant Hunter. He's been around since set 1, a 4/2 with Reckless for 2. It's a big hit. Yes, he dies fairly easily, but he definitely takes out something pretty hard. So, a solid playable. We also have LeFou Instigator. He got downgraded when he was reprinted in set 9 to an uncommon. A 2/2 for 2 isn't amazing, but the Fan the Flames ability is pretty good. When you play this character, ready chosen character, they can't quest for the rest of turn. Sometimes you just need to get your character ready again, or you want to get that extra challenge in. LeFou is a good way of doing it. Lumiere is an all-star. 2/2 with 1 Law for 2 doesn't seem crazy, but your other characters get +1 attack, +1 power. That's just amazing. You leave him on the board, everything else you have gets stronger. He's great, and that's why. Finally, we have the Beast Wounded. This character doesn't seem great, but of course we want to pair him with all the Amethyst damage movement. So the fact he comes in with 4 damage is actually quite convenient if next turn you can play Bell Accomplished Mystic and immediately take 3 of that damage and put it somewhere else. So a 2/6, 2 law with 4 damage, potentially good in the right situation. I wouldn't play him all the time, but if you're going to lean heavily on the Amethyst side of the deck, he's probably worth considering as an easy way of getting some damage to play around with. Then we have Grab Your Bow from the most recent set, an excellent action song, banish up to 2 characters with power 2 or less. We're going to play its cousin, Grab Your Sword, as well, but this one is nice and clean. It just banishes. So, for example, Genie Wish Fulfilled, flying around with that 2/4 evasive, bang bang, grab your bow, gone. So a nice, smooth piece of removal, well worth playing. And then finally, we have that location I talked about, Beast Castle, Winter Garden. 1 cost inkable for a 6 toughness, no law, but whenever a character here challenges another character, you gain a law, and importantly, only 1 ink to move a character here. So it's very much designed to be played with Beast Snowfield Troublemaker, but it's going to have a certain amount of utility in any Ruby deck. And of course, you can ink it if you don't want it. Ruby is a good color for this deck. Now, talking of Ruby and Sapphire, you can see on the left that the multicolored deck for Beauty and the Beast is a Ruby Sapphire one. I'm not going to discuss that yet. We'll look at that when we do deck builds. So ignore those cards now. We're just going to talk about the right hand and the pure Sapphire. Now, Belle Apprentice Inventor is very much an item deck card, but she's still really strong. A 3/3 that you can play for free if you banish an item. There are issues with that in the movie deck, which I'll talk about later, but for now, she's a solid card, and even better when she's free. We have Belle of the Ball, a 2/3 with Ward, 2 Law, and when you play her, your other characters gain Ward until the start of your next turn. I'm a huge fan of Ward. I think it's an immensely powerful ability, and the fact that you can drop Belle and ward your whole board for a turn is very powerful. Definitely a game winner against decks like Frozen that play huge amounts of spot removal. She's uninkable, so I wouldn't play her all the time, but she's certainly got some potential. We have Belle Snowfield Strategist. Whenever one of your characters is banished, put that card from your discard into your Inkwell face down. So she is a good accelerating card. 2/3 and 2 law. Body isn't great, but plenty of law if you can get a sneaky quest in. And she's going to accelerate your ink, which is very important for the next card, which is, of course, Belle Strange but Special. A 2/4 that lets you ink twice a turn. Isn't crazy by itself, but that crazy ability is my favorite part. When you have 10 or more cards in your Inkwell, this character gets +4 law, so she quests for 5 every turn. Now, I wouldn't play a lot of her and expect to see the 10 ink ability go often, but if you're playing Snowfield Strategist, then that's going to get you a lot more ink. So these 2 bells together, potentially quite powerful. The big daddy in Sapphire, though, is Cogsworth Grandfather Clock. A 2/5 with Shift 3. He does, in fact, have a shift target as well. But most importantly, he has Ward himself, he has 2 Law, and all your other characters gain Resist 1. And yes, this stacks if you have multiple Cogsworths in play. He's mad, mostly because he's got Ward, so he can just stay ready for the whole game, and if that's all he does, if he just sits there giving the rest of your board resist 1, that's incredible value by itself. And your opponent cannot remove it unless they're playing Lilo and Stitch or Lion King and they're going to board wipe everything. He's amazing just for that. And then he can quest for 2. He's got a lot of toughness. This guy is the reason that you play Sapphire. He is that strong. Then we have possibly my favorite card, that Gaston the Intellectual Powerhouse. I just love the flavor of this particular shift. But a 4/4 with 3 law for 6 uninkable isn't bad. Shift 4, we've seen in Amber, there are plenty of 3-cost Gastons that we could shift him onto. And most importantly, developed brain. When you play this character, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your deck. This guy is a good, solid card, particularly if you can shift him, then he's an above-statted character with a powerful enter the battlefield ability. I don't always run him in Sapphire, but I do really like him. He's worth considering, I think, in every deck. And then finally, we have the slightly odd choice of the song Ever As Before. It's not incredibly powerful in itself. Remove up to 2 damage from any number of chosen characters. Whatever. But this is the silver bullet for the most powerful movie deck of all, which is Aladdin. Because this can remove 2 damage from any number of chosen characters. So yes, you can choose your opponent's characters. And you can choose all of your opponent's characters, which is very relevant when your opponent's playing a huge number of vanish characters. So what Evers before basically reads is take some damage off your characters and banish any illusions on the board. And since almost every Aladdin deck runs heavily into the illusions because they're so good, this card can be amazing. It's probably a 1 to 2 of in most decks, unless you know you're playing in a meta with a lot of Aladdins, if it's a competitive tournament, for example. So yeah, I wouldn't play more than a couple, but I would probably play them. The downsides are minimal, and it's an Aladdin board wipe, which in a seriously competitive scene is just a crazy card to have available. Finally, we have Steel, and Steel is another absolute powerhouse color, again because of one particular card, which we'll get to in a moment. So first we have LeFou, Opportunistic Flunky, another potentially free character. Now he's a 2/3 rather than the 3/3 for Bell, which drops his usefulness a bit, but his condition is even easier. During your turn, you may play this character for free if an opposing character was banished in a challenge this turn. You're probably going to challenge at some point. You've got cards like the Reckless Gaston, who are very good at it, or say the Rushing Beast. And all you have to do is banish anything in a challenge, and you can drop this guy for free. Then we have the Beast, Forbidding Recluse, a 3/4 for 4, is possibly a little below curve, but that extra 1 damage is quite good. When you play this character, 1 damage to chosen character. It's not always going to be amazing, but sometimes it'll be just what you need. And he's inkable, so I'd say worth playing. Beast Hard-Headed, a 4/4 with 2 lore for 5 inkable, and when you play this character, you may banish chosen item. Pretty good stats for his cost, and the ability, sometimes it won't matter, but sometimes it's going to be really important. Being able to banish something like, say, an Emerald Chromacon could be extremely important, so well worth having. And finally, the GOAT, the reason that we're here in Steel, Beast Tragic Hero. A 3/5 with 2 lore for 5 inkable. He has Shift 3, which is why those 2-cost Beasts in Ruby matter so much. When he was printed in set 2, there were no shift targets, much like Bell Accomplished Mystic. But now we're in set 11, we've got 2 cards we can actually shift him onto turn 3. And that's crazy because of his ability, It's Better This Way. At the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card. That's amazing. And if he does have damage, otherwise, he gets +4 power this turn. So he's either a 7/5 with 2 lore, or you're drawing a card at the start of every turn. That's mad, and if you can drop it on turn 3, it's even worse. This is probably the single most powerful card in the entire movie, and is by far the reason that we play Steel a lot. We do also have 2 very good songs in this deck. We have Grab Your Sword, classic since set 1. Deal 2 damage to each opposing character. It killed Bucky back in the day. It kills Prince Philip, that silly 3/2 with Ward. Basically, it gets around Ward and it hurts people. It's very important for that. And then finally, we have the Mob Song, one of the most expensive spells in the game. Sing together 10, deal 3 damage to up to 3 chosen characters and or locations. So 10 ink for 9 damage isn't great, but you can spread it almost anywhere you want it. And if you've got a couple of big characters out, which Beauty and the Beast specializes in, you can sing it relatively cheaply. So that covers all 6 of our inks. And as we can see, there's no ink with less than at least 4 playable cards, which is a really powerful position to be in. That being said, Amethyst, Ruby, Sapphire, and Steel are definitely the strongest inks. So I've got 3 decks in 3 colors, which unsurprisingly are just using different combinations of these inks. So let's run through those, starting with Amethyst, Ruby, Steel. Now, the big draw of this combination, as I mentioned already, is the 2-drop Beasts into the 5-drop Beast Tragic Hero. So we're running 4 of Beast Aggressive Lord, we're running 4 of Beast Snowfield Troublemaker, and the goal is to play one of those on turn 2 so that we can shift in Beast Tragic Hero on turn 3. If we make that work, we are in a very good place, and we are very happy. Otherwise, we're running Cogsworth Illuminary Watchman as our only 1-drop. And we probably don't want to see this guy turn 1, realistically. We'd much rather play him on a later turn to give a bigger character rush. But if we have to play him, we have to play him. It's fine. We're also running Magical Maid Feather Duster, a 2/2 with 2 lore. The thing about her is there's often much scarier characters on the board when you're playing Beauty and the Beast. So she can gain quite a lot of lore just because your opponent always has more important things to deal with. And they just have to let her go and she quests away for a few lore. Then we've got the 2 lots of Beast. And finally, at 2-drop, we have Lumiere, Fiery Friend, because giving the rest of your characters +1 power is always really good. So that's our 2 drops. At 3 drops, we're playing 4 of Bell Untrained Mystic and 4 of the Wardrobe Bell's Confidant. Much the same reasons as playing Bell. This is just a solid, well-statted character at the cost, and she's inkable. We're running 2 copies, of Mrs. Potts' Enchanted Teapot. As I said earlier, she's a good stat line, and we've got 4 copies of Lumiere 5, and of course we've also got the 4 copies of Cogsworth Luminary Watchman. So with 8 chances to hit the draw a card, I think she is worth playing. Playing 4 copies of the Beast Forbidding Recluse, maybe we could change the balance of that one and Mrs. Potts, perhaps play 3 of each, or maybe even 4 Mrs. Potts and 2 Beast. Depends really what you value. Then at 5 drops, this is where we get the good stuff. We've got the 4 copies of Bell Accomplished Mystic, Amethyst's best card. And of course, we've got the 4 Beast Tragic Heroes, which is Steel's best card. We really want to see these 5 drops. Then we've got 3 copies of Grab Your Bow and 3 copies of Grab Your Sword. Those are our only uninkables, and they provide a lovely removal suite. They're going to do quite a bit of damage to things. We're playing 4 copies of the Mystic Rose because we've got, let me see, 4, 8, 12. We've got 16 beasts and 8 copies of Bell. That's a pretty good rate to be hitting with the Mystic Rose. And of course, because it's an item that can just be banished at any point. So you can play it and then hold on to it until the moment you really want it. Finally, 4 copies of the Beast Castle Winter Garden, which is probably the one drop we actually want to play, realistically. And 4 copies of the Library, a gift from Bell, because it's just so good. So this deck, I think, is probably the single best version of Beauty and the Beast in 3 colors. It's playing to the strengths of Steel and Amethyst with the Accomplished Mystic and the Tragic Hero, and it's also getting some really good cards out of Ruby. So it's going to have an aggressive start, some really powerful cards over the first few turns, and then hopefully you're going to be able to settle in and just drag out your card advantage with Beast Tragic Hero, move damage with Bell, and just overwhelm your opponent effectively with sheer power. On a similar note, we have this deck, which is Amethyst, Ruby, and then Sapphire. So the Amethyst and the Ruby parts are pretty similar, but this time, rather than the Steel, we're leaning into the Sapphire side of the deck, which mostly means that we've replaced Beast Tragic Hero with Cogsworth Grandfather Clock. Similar kind of idea, an inkable 5-drop, shifts for 3 with an outsized impact on the board. This time we're running 3 copies of Chip the Teacup, because we want a few more 1-drops, and still got those 4 copies of Cogsworth. So slightly more 1-drops in this version. At 2, we're playing a bit less because we don't need those beasts anymore. So instead, we're playing Gaston, Arrogant Hunter, for the sheer power of a 4-2 with Reckless. We're still playing Lumiere, of course, because he's very strong. And we're playing Cogsworth, Talking Clock. He can give Gaston the chance to get lore, but most importantly, he is a 2-drop Cogsworth, which means we can shift the Grandfather Clock on 3. In the 3 drops, we've still got the Wardrobe, because it's just a good card. And then we've got 4 copies of Bell Apprentice Inventor as well. This one does have a little bit of item in it, so there's a chance we can play Bell for free relatively early on, and she's still a solid card even if we can't. We're still running Mrs. Potts for the same reason we did earlier. We've got the 4 Cogsworth and the 4 Lumieres. That's a decent hitting chance. We've got 1 copy of Bell of the Ball. I had 1 space spare, so a singleton Bell of the Ball I think is potentially quite powerful. 4 copies of Accomplished Mystic, because she's amazing, of course. 4 copies of Cogsworth, he is also amazing, so this time we're going Amethyst Sapphire for our sort of big knockout blows. Then we've got 4 copies of Lumiere Fired Up. Now, he is very much an items card, but in this deck, we're playing him just because he's good. We've got the shift line with Lumiere Fiery Friend, and a 4-3 with 2 lore and evasive is really quite strong. So if we can drop this guy on turn 3 rather than the Wardrobe or Bell, then we're in a very good place, honestly. Finally, we've got Gaston, Intellectual Powerhouse. I've discussed him already. I think he's great. He's a good curve topper, and maybe if we're lucky, we can get him shifted onto Gaston, Arrogant Hunter in the right circumstances. A nice way of topping out the deck. Then, everything else, we've got the action Get Out. Banish chosen character, then return an item from your discard to hand. It's basically in here as Dragonfire for 1 more ink. If we get to return an item, great, but we're not necessarily banking on it. Still playing Grab Your Bow because it's a good card. And then our items. We've just got a few. We've got 4 copies of Unconventional Tool. This would probably be our ideal one drop because we can drop it for one. And then as we see, when this item is banished, you pay two less for the next item you play this turn. So our absolute ideal for this is unconventional tool, banish it to get Bell Apprentice Inventor in for free, and then play a free copy of the Mystical Rose. It's not the world's best combo, but it's quite a lot for turn one and could potentially be quite useful. And then that sets you up for a nice Bell damage movement early on at some other point. So there you go. There's an Amethyst Ruby Sapphire deck. I don't think this is necessarily quite as strong as the previous deck because Tragic Hero is just that good. But it certainly has potential. It might even have a bit more long-term power because of things like Lumiere Fired Up and Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse. So what about if we drop the Amethyst altogether? We go Ruby, Sapphire, and Steel. So this deck is really quite aggressive. No one drops at all in the characters, but of course we're playing both versions of the Beast, and we're going to play Gaston, and we're going to play Lumiere. So we've got 16 two drops, sorry. They're all Ruby, and they are all aggressive as anything. 3 copies of the Beast Wounded, mostly just for the curve. Our 3 drops were very light. You could perhaps play more copies of LeFou because we are probably going to do a lot of challenging off our 2 drops. So maybe we should play more LeFou and less Beast Wounded. That's very much up to you, but I think the best 3 drops are mostly in Amethyst. So our choices here were a little bit limited. We're running 3 copies of Bell Snowfield Strategist because, as I said, this is an aggressive deck. We're expecting our characters to challenge and to get banished. And because of that, we're going to run 3 copies of Bell Strange but Special as well. Let's try and take advantage of the Snowfield Strategist. Still running 3 copies of Lumiere Fired Up because, as I said before, it's a good card at 5 regardless. 4 copies of the Grandfather Clock because this is the reason we play Sapphire. 4 copies of the Tragic Hero, because this is the reason we play Steel, and also 2 copies of the Beast Hard-Headed. The Beast Hard-Headed, again, is just a solid character, and the ability to banish items isn't half bad. Finally, Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse, for reasons we've discussed before. The 5 drops are perhaps a concern in this deck, but they are all inkable. Lumiere can shift on 3. Beast Tragic Hero can shift on 3. Maybe there is an argument that we should be playing the 2-drop Cogsworth so that we can also shift Cogsworth Grandfather Clock on 3, cut some of our 3 drops to get that blue Cogsworth in, and then we're just going to try and go for a 2-drop shift on 3. Don't need to play any real 3 drops because we're shifting. And then finally, we have got that Gaston 6 cost who can shift on 4. So this deck is relying pretty heavily on that turn 3 shift or that turn 4 shift. Bit riskier than some of the others, but the rewards potentially are massive. And then in terms of everything else, we're playing 3 copies of Get Out, 3 copies of Grab Your Bow, 4 copies of Grab Your Sword. So again, perhaps that's a card we could cut 1 or 2 of just to bring the uninkable count down. And then finally, 4 copies of the Beast Castle. So here we go. Slightly tweaked version of the deck that I think is possibly just a little bit better. You can see we're now up to 22 drops and 19 5 drops. So we're all in at 2 points on the curve. But we do now have all of our 2 drops are potentially shift targets for a turn or 2 later on. And I think that's not a bad position to be in. We can do 8 Beasts for Tragic Hero. We've got 4 Cogsworths for Grandfather Clock. We've got 4 Gastons for the Intellectual Powerhouse and 4 Lumieres for Fired Up. So I think this deck is perhaps the riskiest of the 3 we've played because it's not at all balanced. But if you can get that shift for 3 in, which is going to require a good mulligan every time, and then you're sitting there with a 5-drop over the next couple of turns while you build to 5 ink, it's going to go really well, I think. So this one's probably the highest risk, but potentially, I think, the highest reward as well. Now, I'd mentioned earlier, there is a multicolored Beauty and the Beast. It's Ruby Sapphire, and it's all focused around items. Now, it's a very specific deck. I've built it here, and we're going to run through it, but I don't think it's terribly good, mostly because there just aren't enough items in Beauty and the Beast. They exist, but they're not terribly good. So it means that when you're trying to play this deck, you're just giving yourself a bit of a disadvantage. If we have a look at what I mean, we're down here at the items, 18 of them. For unconventional tools, they are good. We've talked about the combination that can trigger already. We're fine with that one. For Mystic Rose, also good by itself, but, so-so. Rose Lantern, I mentioned it earlier, it's slow. It's mostly in here because we need items to do things. And that's the problem with this deck. We have to make some of those choices. We have to just play items to do stuff. For Maurice's machines, 3 for an item that doesn't do anything by itself is not a great position to be in. When this item is banished, you may return an item card with cost 2 or less from your discard to hand. Now, there is a combo with this card, but fundamentally it just doesn't do an awful lot, which is the problem with it. And then finally, we've got Maurice's Workshop, which is the payoff for playing the items. Every time you play an item, pay an ink, draw a card. That is good. It's just a shame that we have to play so many bad items to make it work. We've still got our 3 copies of Get Out, and then we've got 39 characters, which I always think is a little bit light for this sort of deck. Now, I'll just talk quickly about that combination I mentioned. So we have Maurice's Machine. When it's banished, return an item cost 2 or less. This pairs up with Maurice, Unconventional Inventor, a 5/2. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item of yours to draw a card. So far, so good. If the banished item is named Maurice's Machine, you may also banish chosen character with power 2 or less. So the combo here, as far as it goes, is you play Maurice's Machine on 3. On 4, you play the Unconventional Inventor. You sack the machine to draw a card, and you also get to banish a 2 or less power character. So in the end, you're down 1 card and 7 ink for a 5/2 and the banishment of a 2 or less power character. There are times when that will work really well, and there are, I think, a lot of times when it won't be worth the effort, because you get to return an unconventional tool or maybe a Mystic Rose. That's potentially useful, but it's just not great, is my issue with the whole deck, really. Anyway, let's have a look at the rest. In a 1-drop, we've got Monsieur d'Arc, a 1/2 who's got a sort of miniature Hiram Flavisham ability. Flavisham, of course, is so good he's been banned in everything. Monsieur d'Arc is not so good. Whenever he quests, you may banish an item to draw a card. If he could draw 2 cards, that would be good. 1 card, it's okay. That's why we're playing 2 copies. Now, LeFou Cake Thief is interesting. 2/2 for 2. Exert, banish 1 of your items. Chosen opponent loses law, you gain a law. Sometimes you just need to do that. Sometimes your opponents just have to lose law, or you just have to gain it. And banishing your items can trigger useful things when you're getting rid of a tool. So we play 2 of him. He's all right. We're definitely playing 4 of this Lumiere, a different one before. 1/1, 2 law. When you have an item card in your discard, he gains evasive. He's actually reasonably good. 2 law evasive has always been strong, and we can do this easily enough. 4 copies of Belle Apprentice Inventor, because she's really good. We've discussed her before. 4 of Belle Inventive Engineer. This is another 3-drop Belle. 2/3 of 2 law. When she quests, pay 1 less for the next item you play this turn. Obviously very useful in an item-heavy deck. We have Mrs. Potts, Head Housekeeper, banish an item, draw a card. So we see lots of item-linked cards in existence here, playing a couple of her. We've talked about Maurice. 2 copies of the Wardrobe, Perceptive Friend, another 3/4 Wardrobe, but this time you can discard an item to draw 2 cards. So similar to Mrs. Potts, but this time you're getting an item from hand for 2 cards, rather than an item on the field for 1 card. They both have their uses. Belle Accomplished Mystic, because she's amazing, why wouldn't we play her? This is the deck that Lumiere Fired Friend is really for. And we've got the Shift 3 again. This time we shift him onto the Nimble Candelabra, but he's still very good. 2 copies of the Beast, Frustrated Designer, another custom card for this deck. A 5/5 with 2 law. Pay 2 ink, exert him, and banish 2 of your items to deal 5 damage to chosen character. That's a lot of effort being put in. 2 items and 2 ink, but sometimes you need 5 damage to a character. But honestly, I'd probably prefer to just challenge them with the Beast if I need 5 damage. Still, it's an option, and it might help us get rid of something difficult like Maui Half Shark if we have to. 4 copies of Maurice, World Famous Inventor. He's one of the big reasons to actually play this deck. A 2/7 with 2 law. When he quests, you pay 2 less for your next item, so he's like Belle Inventive Engineer, but twice as good for twice the cost. And whenever you play an item, draw a card. He's your engine. If we could just get him in quicker than turn 6, this deck might actually be good. And then finally, 3 copies of Belle Mechanic Extraordinaire. A 7/7 for 9 with a shift 7 is quite interesting. But for every item in your discard, you pay 1 less to shift this character. So she could come in pretty cheap if you've filled up your discard a bit. And finally, Repurpose. Whenever this character quests, you may put up to 3 item cards from your discard at the bottom of your deck to gain 1 law for each item card moved this way. So she really benefits from you filling up your discard with items and then getting them all back for lore. Potentially, I think she's amazing. But again, I just don't think this deck has enough good items to be really worthwhile. This is the one I think benefits the most if you're allowed to play Lorcana specific cards. Because if we can play Lorcana specific, then, for example, we could play Ink Runner in a 2-drop slot, probably instead of the Rose Lantern. An item lets us draw a card and has that useful alert function. We could also switch to Steel so that we could play Fortisphere, play 1 ink, draw a card, and we don't really care about the rest of its abilities. So this deck, I think potentially, if you can play Lorcana-specific cards, you switch to playing Ruby, Sapphire, Steel, you play Fortisphere, you play Tragic Hero, and you just drop the Amethyst. The Amethyst isn't crazy in this deck. It's only here because we need the Mystic Rose and the Rose Lantern. I like the idea of this deck. It's just not terribly strong. I think the other versions of the deck that I've suggested are quite a bit stronger than this overall. Now, I've got 2 more decks to show you quickly. First of all, a 4-color deck, if you're allowed 4 inks. This one is very similar to our previous ones. All we've done is we've added in a little bit of amber. So we've still got our ruby, our sapphire, and our steel, but we've now got Gaston, Despicable Dealer, to make it easier to hit our 5-drops. Play him on 3, and then all of a sudden our 5-drops can come down with only 3 ink in play. Very straightforward. And on top of that, we've got 4 copies of Be Our Guest to help us find all those lovely 5-drops. And then finally, a very silly deck, but it's a lot of fun, a 6-color Beauty and the Beast deck. Now, this one's built entirely on the Beast Gracious Prince. We're just playing all the beasts and all the bells. It's very straightforward. So you get 12 2-drops, 8 beasts at 2. We then play 4, 8, 12 bells at 3. We play 4, 8, 12 bells at 4. Beast at 5. Accomplished Mystic at 5. Hidden Archer at 5. Tragic Hero at 5. Beast Relentless at 6. And then 4 copies of the Mystic Rose, 4 copies of the Library. This one's a silly deck. If you can ever play a movie deck in 6 colors, I do it just because it's fun. But fundamentally, this deck is just going to slam down lots of characters and then hopefully do something ridiculous with playing the Mystic Rose, making your beasts huge lore, and moving all the damage off your bells. I don't know if it'll ever work, but I really want to try it because I think it would be amazing. As we've seen, Beauty and the Beast is a really good movie deck. It has an absolute wealth of powerful cards in every single color. There's not, I think, a single bad ink to play when you're playing Beauty and the Beast. It's what makes this particular movie such a rewarding one to play. Thank you very much for watching. And once again, if you would like to see a video on any particular movie or on a particular Lorcana build, please do let me know down in the comments. And I'll see you next time for another Inkwell remix.